Okay, so welcome everyone to the most badass lecture that you will ever sit on. That is a promise. Please check your schedules and make sure that you are ready to consume Final Girl 101. I know that we're significantly late, but this is a great discussion, so we had to wait for you guys. If you're not here for Final Girl 101, you are here for Final Girl 101 because we've already locked the doors and you can't escape. You looked. I'm just kidding. You can leave at any time. My name is Zero Gravity. I am a journalist and horror media personality based here in New York City. And today I'm really excited to have this conversation with this fabulous panelists. And today we're going to have a really rich conversation about femme representation and the final girl trope in horror, which you might have heard of before. So I am thrilled to present this panel of amazing femmes that I've had the pleasure to get to know through the horror community and the horror industry. Most of them are local to New York City. They inspire me every day with their knowledge of the genre and their drive in the industry. So I hope for the best that you guys can soak up some of that energy in the next hour. So without further ado, let's get to know the panel. So let's start from all the way here, all the way down. Please introduce yourself. And give me a sentence or two. What is it about you?
Can y'all hear me? Okay. First of all, my panel mates are shady because they left this spot for me, but it's fine. My name is Gigi Murakami. I am a horror manga artist and illustrator. My career kind of teeters between horror manga and horror film, but yes, that is what I do. I also do some horror content on Instagram and on YouTube. So that is me. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Kat. Ooh, that's real loud, girl. I'm Kat Daddy, one half of the Girl That's Scary podcast. We are a horror and sci-fi based podcast. My co-host Jazz, the 40-ounce connoisseur, is here in spirit with us today. She has photoshopped herself into all the places so you cannot see her. But yeah, we have a new episode that comes out every Thursday, and we are on the Dread Central Podcast Network. So I'm excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Dee or Ghosdee. I'm New York-based horror YouTuber. I also have a little bit of a podcast. I make music. Horror is the best thing ever. And yeah, that's pretty much it about me. Oh, you already have a mic.
Hi, I'm Audrey. I'm Audrey E. Lorber. I'm a horror filmmaker and video producer here in Brooklyn. I love horror movies.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam McLaren. I am Scottish, despite my accent now being very Americanized. I am a horror writer who writes for Fangoria, Horror Press, and a few other outlets. I'm an artist, and I just love horror movies, so I'm so excited to be here talking to you all today.
Awesome. And again, I'm going to be moderating this panel. My name is Zero Gravity, and we're going to get into the good stuff. So first, I'm going to go down the line and ask you all the same question again, but our relatives might think we are insane for it, but why horror?
Good question. Because horror is fun. Like, who doesn't like something that is deranged every once in a while, right? Like, horror is interesting because, like, it's really, like, what your imagination can come up to, like different scenarios that you can imagine yourself or somebody else in. That, like, kind of intellectual exercise is kind of fun.
Intellectual exercise.
It's an intellectual exercise.
I'm writing that one down.
Horror is a great escape from all the things. Sometimes it gets to be a lot being a human on this planet that we all share. And it's a really good time to just like unplug and tune in to something scary. Outside of it being like a space where you're kind of like, you know, maybe seeing yourself, a reflection of yourself, or maybe you're trying to explore something different and something more complex. But horror is a great escape for me.
Funny enough, my relatives are why I'm into horror, because I come from a long lineage of weirdos. So I grew up watching horror, but I got attached to horror because as a child who grew up with a lot of horror in my personal life, a lot of trauma, it was all I could relate to. Like, I related to seeing people die more than I related to, like, I don't know, whatever else the kids were watching those days. But yeah, that's why I love horror.
Same. I always loved scary movies, horror movies. I always loved them. And like you said, life is just so scary. Like there's so many horrific parts of life. It's so comforting sometimes to not be experiencing it and to like live vicariously through it all and not like have to suffer any of the consequences.
Yeah, I think for me, horror's always fascinated me because I think it's one of the few genres that's really willing to engage with kind of societal taboos in a, not always a direct way, but it's willing to be a little bit more open with them and explorative with them than some of the more mainstream kind of genres. Horror's mainstream now, but it hasn't always been. And I think that makes it such a fascinating kind of playground for filmmakers to touch on things that we don't really talk about in society or the little problems in society that no one really wants to address. So I just think it's a fascinating genre, especially, you know, as a queer person, and I'm sure like people of color feel the same way. It's the place where you go for stuff that isn't talked about elsewhere, and that's so exciting for me.
Absolutely. Hard agree with everything on this panel so far. So on the syllabus today is the topic of final girls. So if you signed up for this class, you probably already know what a final girl is, but this is an intro class at the end of the day. It's Final Girl 101. So can someone in the audience tell me what a final girl is? Hands. No one knows what a final girl is. Nobody can even make a guess. It's okay. Okay, let's go right down here. What's a final girl? Perfect. Perfect description. A final girl is the girl in the horror movie who survives against all odds, usually in a slasher type situation. We all know Freddy, we all know Jason, we all know Michael Myers. Jamie Lee Curtis, okay, Freaky Friday herself, is our pinnacle final girl. But we're gonna get into that, dig into the goods and the bads and the ins and outs of the trope, as it is a trope after all. So a question for the panel: who is your favorite final girl? I think we can start it really easy. Maybe that's not so easy.
So I'm not gonna hold you. I'm gonna be real basic because slasher is not my favorite genre of horror. And we're gonna go with Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode. From the first Halloween down the line, her character has grown so much as a person and just as a character, like the strength that she has in battling this entity that is her brother, because we're not talking about a human. I find that to be really inspiring, dare I say it, because who knows, this is the battle that never ends. And with each movie, she comes more and more mentally prepared for it. So I find that to be quite admirable.
Yeah, Laurie Strode is definitely a woman who refuses to fail.
Oh, sure. The same way that Mike refuses to die.
What about you, Kat?
I think my favorite final girl today, because it changes. Like it changed everywhere. My favorite final girl today is Carla from I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. Yes.
Played by?
Played by Brandy Norwood, okay?
Hell yeah.
Okay, because Brandy is in a movie. This is around the time that we have random, people, musicians and things who are pulling up. I'm a fan, because I'm a fan of Brandy, but a fan of Carla because she's going through this journey, she's going through all the things. I hate that she has to get her behind beat the way that she does, but we're able to leave the room and then we come back and we make it. I love that. I would like to also leave the room when some crap goes down and come back and go, surprise, I made it. I like it because she's defeating all odds. Yes, she went toe-to-toe with the killer at one point, but you don't have to subscribe yourself to this. And I was happy that we did not have to watch the black person die in the worst kind of way or because they made a stupid decision. And in fact, they made it all the way to the end. We should all be rewarded. No, Makai doesn't count.
Today, my final or favorite final girl is Grace from Ready or Not. I don't think she comes up a lot in conversation. I think when I watched Ready or Not, I was like, this is actually a final girl, because I felt like she survived, like her survival instincts, like human survival instincts. And I think a lot of that stemmed from the fact that she grew up in an insecure, unstable home. Like she already had it built in her, like to survive, to get through was already in her. And I think like that would ultimately led her just to have the power to overcome those people that literally planned to kill her. Like there was no way for her to survive, and she still did.
I thought a lot about this. I had some time. And my favorite is definitely Ripley from Alien, the first one. I know it gets kind of muddy. She becomes her own villain, but I love her. Like, I think one of the hardest parts about watching a scary or horror movie is that you're like, nobody would act like this. Like, why don't they know they're in a scary movie? Like, why aren't they checking behind the... And Ripley just, like, she knew. And I think that's why it's really fun to watch Final Girls, because, like, they are a great, point of view for the audience. Like, they are nervous, and they're watching out behind their back. And I think Ripley does a great job with that, like, taking charge of the ship, why did you let them in? Like, the whole business of it all, and saving the cat. That was very important.
Don't forget about the cat.
Yeah, I actually anticipated somebody was going to say Ripley, because that would have been my answer, but I was like, someone's going to say it before me, so I got to think of number one. And I swear I'm not just inspired by Audrey's cosplay, but I want to talk about Maxine Minx from X. I think she's such a fascinating character as a final girl, because we'll probably come back to this at some point in the panel, but sex is such a no-no in slasher films in particular. That is usually the thing that gets you killed, and the final girl is distinguished because she is very chaste and sex-averse to an extent. And Maxine is not only sex-positive, she's a sex worker. She's filming a porno in the movie, and she still comes out on top as the final girl. And I think we haven't seen Maxine, the third in the trilogy yet, but I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with her character, because it looks like she's coming into herself in a way that we don't usually see final girls do. She's almost becoming vicious, and I'm so excited to see what that's going to look like. So hopefully they don't fuck it up, but I feel really good about it. I love her.
Yeah, let's all keep our fingers crossed for that one, because I know Maxine is very high on everyone's watch list for this year. So the final girl, it's a trope after all, right? And as veterans of the genre, are you able to find any unfair social commentary on what makes a final girl? You know, in hindsight, in the definition, it's a good thing, you know? We're making it to the end, we're persevering, we're living, we're defeating, conquering, winning. But is there any time that you would notice some sort of unfair social commentary with this trope of final girl that doesn't really add up?
So adding on to what Sam said about Max, like, that is, like, sex really is, like, the mark of, like, you're deaf in these types of movies. And so the idea that the final girl is this very innocent, like, puritanical kind of, like, image of, like, femalehood, and that is, like, what is protected because they are not, like, engaging in sexual activity is, like, ridiculous.
Yes.
Which is why, like, you know, with X, like, that is why it's so beloved, because, like, you know, you can be, like, why should you be denied life because you are doing something that humans have been doing for ages? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So I do think that is something that we could do away with. I'm also, I guess, a little partial to the idea of a final girl, and, like, maybe this is more of a revenge sort of situation with horror, but a final girl being violated in that way, I think we can kind of do away with that also. But yeah, that's just me. I think we don't need to make those types of topics as complicated as they have been in, like, horror film, so.
Yeah, just to put a +1 on literally that and everything else that Sam had said, I want to zoom in a bit more on like the celebration of virtue when it comes to the final girl or final folk in general. I really like the movie Sissy. If you have not seen Sissy, because when I was going, I was like, ooh, I can't wait to talk about it. Sissy is a movie that really challenges the idea of what the final girl looks like. There's a couple other too, but it does, because not to give too much for those who have not seen Sissy, she's a person that has been bullied. I mean, she does make some shaky choices, but she's a person that has been bullied. And then, of course, you know, she's like this one, they go on a trip, and you know, the crazy stuff's gonna happen on the trip. But at the end, for her to rise to the top, I'm not gonna spoil how that happens. It's a really interesting choice that despite everything what happens, she ends up being the final girl, and then also profits off being the final girl. And for those who like haven't seen it and then see it later and then you try to jump me, that's cool. But I'm like, I love that because that's not a story. How that story is portrayed is not something that we normally see when it comes to final folk in horror. It's like, if you see the story, like, oh, if everything, this person should be the one that dies, and then they don't. And I honestly would like to see more things like that, especially when it comes to final folk, because I'm tired of the same story, like, oh, I ran through the woods, oh, my friends died, my shoes, I didn't have sex, oh my God, like, no, oh my God, my man, like, my man, girl, you need to get to safety, like, it's 2024, we can do better.
Yeah, I just want to say that historically, the final girl is someone who is white, someone who is considered pure. And I feel like that just was born out of the minds of white men projecting what they thought was the most valuable woman. The most valuable woman is a white woman who is pure, cries the whole time, and then boo, she's, you know, and I just feel like, look at us. Are white women who are pure the only people that live in, no, I just feel like that was born at a time, and like, you know, feminism in like the early days, like, oh, women can do shit. Okay, yeah, more than white women can do shit. More than white women who don't have sex, you know?
More than straight white women.
Straight white women who don't have sex. It's such a small category of people. So I just feel like, yeah, like the trope in itself excludes the human race. Like, I don't know. So in that case, like, that's where I see the, you know, the injustice.
Yeah. I'm so with you on that, especially like when you look at the true definition of the final girl, like Carol J. Clover wrote about. One of the things that like she really harps on that I totally like, yeah, that's what they were thinking. They were like, who could we put up against the big bad that everyone would be scared, like, and like she there's no way she can defeat him because she's this small little girl, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's one of the things that is really talked about in The Final Girl, like if you look into the theory about it, is like, okay, so then the girl takes the phallic object and she becomes the top, you know, and like murders the guy, and it's like, okay, but this feels like a little bit, I don't know, it's so interesting. So much of it is like outdated and excludes so many people, and it's like almost like, oh, like that was the point? Like, it's like, oh. But yeah, ups to everything you guys said.
Yeah, I would just add a few more kind of demographic details there, because the final girl is, as we've said, she's usually white, almost exclusively white. She's almost exclusively heterosexual, cisgender. I mean, I would expect that for the 80s, but like still now. She's usually comfortably middle class, which I think is interesting. Like she usually, you know, I think Nancy's got her big house on Elm Street, and Laurie is like comfortable babysitting job. Like these are not poor women. Poor women are disposable in horror a lot of the time, at least previously. They're slowly clawing their way up. So I think the problem with Final Girls is that it almost conditions us to view a certain class of women as more natural victims, and they're able to die, and you can cheer them on as they're dying. But then you see this chaste, white, middle-class woman, and you immediately are conditioned to realize, oh, she's the final girl, she's the survivor, she's more worthy of life than all of her friends who were silly and fucked around and found out, literally. And I think that's like the inherent problem with the trope. You can still enjoy these films, I still enjoy these films, I'm not telling you you can't love final girls, they're fun, but there is something deeply harmful right at the root of it. And you know, as my fellow panelists have said, I think this stems from white male writers who don't understand women and don't understand where that kind of core survival instinct potentially can come from marginalized women, which, you know, now we're starting to see it come out, but I want to see even more of it in the future of horror.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this might even just be an obvious question, but I think we should talk about it, is like, how do those changes start? Yeah. How do they start?
More female filmmakers.
More female filmmakers. If
Of all
y'all don't
colors.
put some women in the motherfucking writing room, I'm sorry.
And
You
add some
deserve
color.
to be in the writing room. Make sure that there is women of color in your writing room. Give them an opportunity out in front of the camera just as much as behind the camera, because we can't afford to be making these mistakes these days. And I think it's pretty, unfortunately, kind of common where we see a film that is kind of marketed towards us as women, but then you take a look in the credits, right? And it's not actually FUBU. It's for us, but it's not actually by us. Yeah. And I think that we can sniff it out at this point when something is not an accurate representation of what it's trying to be. And I think that the best way, even though Audrey is, but not all of us are filmmakers in this room, but the best way to combat that is to just be loud on social media. If you have an issue with it, then have a conversation about it, because the more we talk about it, then the more it's common knowledge that this shit needs to change, and it's about time. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the small applause. So, okay, let's get a little bit more positive, because I think I just took the vibe down just a second.
It's all good.
But we're all fans here. Is there something that you've been waiting to see in the final girl trope, or in the future of women and femmes in horror in general, that you're kind of twiddling your thumbs in anticipation? What is it that you want to see that should come out next?
I have one already.
Yeah, let's go.
Well, I am a fan of like breaking away from final girl period. I think it should be final person.
Yep.
But what I really would like to see is more of like a duo, more like sibling. I love that Jordan Peele had the final siblings. I love that in the Black Phone they were siblings. Maybe I'm just saying this because I have siblings, but like I want to see more like duo, more trios, more like even in the end of Scream, like it's so cool that multiple people are surviving. Yeah, like why can't more than one person survive? Like you also might need more than one person to defeat a person. You know, like I would really love to see that. Especially, I love the brother-sister trope, because a lot of films center like around romance, relationships around relationships and romance, relationships and friendship. Let's talk about siblings. Let's talk about family. Mm-hmm. You know, these are other relationships that are just as important, if not, that deserves a spot in film.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would love to see a final girl, final them, be more reckless. Like, I feel like the final girl loves to be like, I don't have sex and that's why I know what's going on. Like, I can see everything that you don't see. Like, in that way, oh, this is controversial. In that way, maybe the final girl is like OG, like not like other girls. She's so like, she's so vanilla. Like she's the one that doesn't want to do anything. It's like, why does she get to win? Like, I want to see some other girls win. Like,
Final girl likes Taylor Swift.
for real.
I love how you said at the start that final them, because that's something I would really love is more trans and non-binary final characters. There's something interesting that happens with a lot of final girls, especially in the 80s. And Carol J. Clover talks about this in her book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws, which you reference. For those of you who don't know, Carol J. Clover originated the term final girls. And that book's a little outdated now, but it's still got some really interesting concepts. And she points out that a lot of final girls, not all of them, but a surprisingly large number have gender-neutral names. So you've got a Laurie or a Marty in Hell Night, or Stretch in Texas Chainsaw 2. So they have these kind of ambiguous names, and they're often slightly like masculine coded in some ways, and the killer is usually slightly feminine coded. There's the sort of slippage that happens that allows a presumed male audience to identify more with the final girl. And I think that creates an interesting space for like what happens if the final girl is a trans woman or is non-binary. Like, what does that do to the gender dynamic inherent in the slasher trope? I would love to see that. I'm not trans or no-binary, so I'm not the person to write it. I want to see more filmmakers who have that lived experience kind of bringing that to life. And there are some already out there doing this work. I really recommend checking out the films of Alice Mayo Mackay, probably mispronouncing her name, sorry to her, but like she's an Australian filmmaker. She's like 19 years old, she's so young.
I love her.
Yeah, insanely young, done like 5 films already. They're all really fun, trans-led and directed, and just, she's doing the work, and I want more funding and more celebration of other filmmakers doing that, because there's so much potential in that kind of gender fuckery. I want to see it. I'm hungry for it.
Yeah. Seconded, thirded, like fourth. Alice Mayo Mackay is a force to be reckoned with.
Period.
She really is. She's Australian, and I don't know what the laws are over there, but over here, she cannot even have a legal drink, and she is in the process of distributing her 5th feature film right now. Kat and I were just in Salem, Massachusetts for a Salem Horror Film Festival, and we caught her most recent, which is called Carnage for Christmas. And it follows a trans podcaster who comes back to her hometown, and surprise, it's a slasher situation. And now that I'm thinking about it, it actually touches on a bunch of things that you guys mentioned that you would like to see in, further final girl, trope situations where we have an ensemble that, perseveres. We have gender non-conforming people that persevere, and it's because of their differences that they're able to survive. And that's realistic, right?
Yeah.
It's not just, oh, I don't have sex and I read the Bible, so... and I study, so he's looking out for me. That's not realistic. We need the chick who dives into true crime so she knows how a killer would act. We need the chick who knows how to use a gun, because this is real, and it's a slasher situation at the end of the day. It's more realistic, and we need to the best of our ability, support young filmmakers that show us these things, because again, she cannot even have a legal drink in the United States. So if we stand behind her, throw her $5 every now and then when she's got her Kickstarter up, by the time that she can have a legal drink, who knows where she will be and the type of content that she should be giving us. So any other last points on what we want to see?
I'm just so glad that y'all brought her up, because that was a belief. I'm like, yes, please. Between seeing more queer, trans, non-binary folks in final folks roles, I would also like to see more non-able-bodied people in these spaces. Yeah, because we already know, if anything, anyone who is not able-bodied is getting out of there in the first couple seconds.
Texas Chainsaw, the brother.
Yeah. Literally, the first person one of the first people you're getting up out of there. See, there we go. And that's why I would like to see these folks, because these are the folks that they're slowing down the group. No, fuck you, seriously. So, I would like to see more movies, more roles, more spaces where that is my final person. Or this is, because I agree with you too, Ghosdee, having more people, a group of people. Let's have a gang of people, because obviously we all can't do all the things, Dolo. So why do we all have to die? Maybe a pair or a trio, because I feel like if too many people make it to the end, well, girl, what's going on?
How effective is that killer,
Really?
Yeah,
Because it was the blackening.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah.
So in addition to that, with Kat's point of people who are not able-bodied, kind of being in the way, I think by having non-able-bodied people being that archetypical final girl, it also helps with them not also being villains, because that also is typically a thing. Somebody who is either not able-bodied or somebody who is sick or like mentally ill, and like that being like their place being like the villain within the story. I think that
Looking at Jigsaw.
I was just about to say.
That-
But like that being like that is, even though Jigsaw is like legendary,
He's iconic.
but
so
like
iconic.
it's still like he's still a villain, and it's like, you know, if we could kind of switch things up and maybe make more you know, unable-bodied people like
Yeah.
final girls. Yeah.
People who are
or final
able-bodied.
people.
Yeah,
rather.
final
yeah.
people.
Yeah.
You know, that section of humanity have a lot to offer that's not, you know, what you can't do, right? In a better perspective, because these people look at the world differently than we do. If, you know, I can do things that they can't. But that also provides a perspective where maybe you could be a great asset for getting us the hell out of a situation, you know what I'm saying? And you're right, also, we can move away from that in horror. Like, my disability doesn't have to be my villain origin story. It could be the thing that helps us get the fuck out of here, which I haven't seen yet, and I would love to see that. Yeah. Yeah. Gigi, you're just gonna have to write it. Anyone else before we move on? All right, all good. All right, so let's take a beeline away from the classic trope for a moment and jump into a relatively new subgenre in horror, which is called Good for Her. I'm not gonna put the audience on the spot this time, but please raise your hand if you have heard the term good for her in cinema before. Nobody's heard of good. Yeah, okay, we got one hand in the back. Good for her. Okay, so I'm gonna let one of y'all explain. Can one of y'all explain what good for her horror is?
I feel like good for her is just signifying a woman who took her power back after she lost her power, in any sense, you know, any tragedy. Usually it involves getting revenge on a man.
Yeah.
Mostly it's that, but it doesn't always have to be that.
Right, so think about Midsommar.
Yeah.
Think about Promising Young Woman. Think about, there's a bunch of other examples, but it's really booming right now, this good for her subgenre, and it's able to say a lot of things about womanhood in dire situations that the final girl just can't do. So it's kind of expanded it a little bit more about, you know, getting your last laugh at the end of the day, because there's a lot of experiences that are very specific to femme-presenting people. And that doesn't always have to mean I'm being chased around with a knife, and it's, you know, it's still as dire, but not as surviving the killer at the end of the movie. So for the panel, what qualities can we gain in the good for her subgenre that we typically won't see in a final girl trope? Let's go, Sam.
I think the thing that differentiates them for me, and I will say, there are always exceptions that prove the rule. So this is not true of every slasher film, and it's not true of every good for her film. But I think that in the slasher film, you start off with this character who is in a relatively privileged position. You know, she is your like stereotypical American high schooler living her nice life. She's got her boyfriend who's eventually going to get pulled through the bed sheets by Freddy. But you know, she's nice and she's comfortable, and she gets dragged into hell. She has to stumble over the bodies of her friends, and then she has to fight her way out of hell. Whereas in the good for her subgenre, I think we're seeing more women who are already in hell.
Yes,
They're
yes.
already struggling, you know. I wrote a few examples down, but you know, in The Witch, Thomason is dealing with Puritanism and the constraints of that. In Your Next, Erin grew up in a survivalist compound, and that was horribly like traumatizing as a child. In The Invisible Man, Cecilia is dealing with abuse in her relationship and gaslighting. Midsommar, Danny's parents are dead. They're already in hell. They're already deeply traumatized, and it's like the inversion of the final girl, because she is dragging herself out of hell and finding her power, as you already said. I think that's what's so empowering about it, is that I think a lot of us have trauma, and we can empathize with someone who is already traumatized and is finding her power through, you know, fighting her way out of a situation. I think potentially better than we can relate to somebody who was doing just fine and then bad things happen to them. For me, I think that's what makes Good for Her horror it's not always perfect. And there's plenty of people who will come out of the woodwork and say like, oh, well, Danny is actually not a very good character because her boyfriend was raped. Sorry, trigger warning. And yeah, you can acknowledge that there's problematic aspects, but she's still finding her power and fighting her way out of a bad situation. And that, I think, is empowering for a lot of women viewers and a lot of people who maybe are dealing with trauma in their past.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? That the way that it all kind of spans out, and it's almost like, I feel like it reminds me a lot less of the final girl trope and a lot more of rape revenge movies.
100%.
Like it's a lot less about our character and a lot more like about what the movie's trying to say almost. Like it's about what you said, like going through something terrible and coming out the other side, but they're not final girls in the same way. Like I don't know, it's almost like the trauma that they endure almost, you can feel it in the end still. Even when they win. I feel like a lot of final girls, it's like, we stabbed the big bad, and Michael's gonna come back next movie, but he's not here now, And it's like, it's peaches and rainbows, and we're gonna have a dance party at the end, but it's like, I feel like in Good For Her movies, it's a lot more like, you could see it on their face, Like, it's always the end, and they're always just smiling, and it's like, that's not a smile, really. Like, we saw what you went through, and like, I feel like you want to know more after that. Whereas, like, when a final girl defeats a big bad, it's almost like, she did it.
Yeah.
Cut to credits.
It's the end of the story. I can't believe I forgot about, like, the #1 Good For Her example, which Sam and I just watched a couple weeks ago, but Carrie.
Yes.
Carrie.
Absolutely.
Prototype.
I love
Everyone in that gym gets what's coming to them.
Hell yeah.
Because why? Because plug it up. Anyway, continue, guys.
But it definitely does feel like a prototype because Carrie dies, which you don't see so much in the Good For Her trope now. She's almost always traumatized but alive at the end.
Yes.
And Carrie, I think, like in the 70s, they couldn't quite conceive of, this character goes through this trauma and goes through this monstrosity and lives. So I think that makes it a really interesting, really early kind of progenitor of this trope, but it's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Like the seeds are there, but like Carrie's still gotta fucking die at the end. So there's no way she was getting out of that.
Yeah. I also wanted to add that I think, as opposed to the final girl, the girls that are in the Good For Her girls are like spicier. Yeah. They don't have to like fight back their attacker. Like final girls have to fight to survive. Like their attacker's trying to kill them. The Good For Her girls are mad, and they need to do this to make themselves feel better. So I feel like they're just a little bit more of a bad girl than like the final girls. They're taking this in their hands. Yeah. The rage is raging.
Kind of like, yes, plus one on everything. Kind of like I talked a little bit about in Sissy, like really good example of like your Good For Her girl stories, but then also like final folk stories. Like the character is complicated in some spaces, air quotes, because it's not that complicated. Especially for that, so I'm like, no, that's not that complicated. But like what you typically see for a final girl, they don't fit in any of those boxes, but you still find yourself like kind of aligning with what they got going on, and then also happy that they made it to the end. Like, no, it doesn't really look like, something that was like positive and polished, but still like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Like Danny and Midsommar. If you haven't seen Midsommar, I'm sorry, I'm about to spoil it for you. But like, okay, like, yeah, maybe there were a lot of shaky decisions along the way. Okay, maybe we're now in a cult, but good for her. She got rid of her really terrible boyfriend. She got away from all the sad stuff that was going on with her family. Her whole family is dead. What is left for her back at America? Nothing. Exactly. And now you're happy in this cult, and you're having a great time, and you've learned some new skills. Really, really good way to look at that, because now you're trapped. You did learn new skills. You're working on farming and murder and gardening and, all kinds of stuff. Blood magic. We love it here.
Go on. What is the taxidermy shit?
I like taxidermy and blood magic. That's some good skills to have.
Should we all join a cult? It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Welcome to the first official cult meeting of Brooklyn Comic Con. Again, we bolted the door, so I hope you guys had a good time. Gigi, you have something to add? Should we keep it rocking? Okay. I think I broke Gigi with that one.
Skills is crazy.
Okay,
That
so
is a wild statement, Kat.
we are quickly running out of time. We're gonna get one last rec from the panel, but while we give you that, I would like to give you the opportunity to think of a question if you have any questions for the panelists, so brew that up right now. But for the panel, the last thing I'm gonna ask is, where can the people find you? Can the people keep up with your work? And also, can you give them some homework, because this is a college course at the end of the day. Can you give them some homework of one film that you would recommend that you think exudes ultimate femme energy? Doesn't have to be good for her, doesn't have to be Final Girl, but where can they get that good femme energy? You can start wherever, jump on in.
Yes.
Again, I'm Dee, that's Ghosdee, Ghosdee. Add an underscore under that, that's on Instagram, without an underscore on Twitter, Ghosdee on YouTube, Spotify. And you all need to watch the movie Teeth by Mitchell. I'm not gonna pronounce his last name. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a 2000s horror movie. It's about a woman that has a vagina that eats people. That's all I'm gonna say.
Take notes. I'm Audrey once again. You can find me on audreylorber.com or at dropdeadgorgeousfilms on Instagram. And homework, everyone go on Shudder, because I know you have Shudder, and watch Revenge 2017.
Love that one.
Oh, it's so good! I didn't get to talk about it earlier, but it's about this like very promiscuous woman, and she is a final girl, which is so refreshing to see. And she kicks ass in that movie, and she does like DMT. It's very fun. Please go watch. That is all.
Yeah, +1 to that, although big trigger warnings for Revenge.
Yeah.
When I started watching it the first time, I had to put it aside for a couple of days and come back to it. But fantastic film, if you can power through it, do. I am Samantha McLaren. I am on Instagram and Twitter at @themeatispeople. Yes. Just think cannibalism and you will find me. I'm not a cannibal yet, just kidding. But, you know, I would also recommend a Shudder film. So if you have Shudder, it's a good day for you. It's a Mexican horror film. It's called, and I'm probably going to mispronounce it, I'm so sorry to the filmmaker, Xero the Bone Woman.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Absolutely fantastic movie. It's body horror. I think it really is in dialogue with good for her horror. It's about a woman who doesn't really want to have kids, but like feels the pressure to when she gets pregnant. And like I said, lots of pregnancy body horror, which for me as a queer person really like sets me off. So highly recommend, female-directed film. Check it out.
I'm gonna break the rules because I never listen to Xero. So I'm gonna recommend T-Blockers and Carnage for Christmas, because we've mentioned it up here. You need to see them both. You need to see all the things. They're really fun. And I'm Cat Daddy, one half of Girl That's Scary. You can find me on all the things Girl That's Scary. If you type in Girl That's Scary in the Google machine, I hope the AI doesn't play in your face. And it takes you to all the things.
Oh, okay. I'm not gonna hold you. I cannot hear that well because the echo, so I apologize if somebody said this already. But I think my movie that I'm gonna recommend for homework, if you haven't seen it already, is Suspiria. Oh. The original version, the Argento version. It's just good. It's just fun. It's like easy horror. It's not too much. It's pretty. It's like, it might be a little heavy on the senses if you like can't do loud noises, but like it's easy and it's pretty to look at. And again, my name is Gigi Murakami. I'm a horror manga artist and illustrator and content creator. You can find me on Instagram at Gigi_Murakami and Gigi Murakami everywhere else.
Yeah.
Oh, and I also have a table in the exhibitors room.
Yes, go buy Gigi's merch.
Some money.
Yes.
L2.
Suspiria is a great fucking movie, and it has one of the best horror soundtracks of all time. If you like to jam, if that's up your alley. It also is a huge missed opportunity for some like a little lesbian like love story, which I think they should have thrown in there. But you know, to each his own. It's all right. I guess we're just gonna have to write it.
It was a time.
It was a time. And my name is Zero Gravity. I have been moderating Final Girl 101 with my friends and scholars here. I am a journalist and media personality. I also have a podcast called Blurdy Massacre that you could listen to on all podcast platforms. You can find me on the internet at XG Horror. Those are my initials, Zero Gravity, XG Horror. And a movie that I would like to recommend, I don't know if you can find streaming right now, but I'm going to recommend it until the day I die, and hopefully people will talk about it on social media enough where somebody will fucking put it back on streaming, because what the fuck. But it was on Netflix a couple years ago. It's called Sweetheart. It's a survival situation. And it is good, baby. I stumbled upon this one by accident. I had no idea it was a survival horror. I had no idea that I was gonna fall in love with this final girl. But I pressed play on Netflix this one fateful day because there was a brown girl on the cover and she had a similar haircut to me. So I said, ooh, I wanna see what she's about. And it ended up being one of the wildest creature features I have ever seen. And you guys are not ready. So maybe don't torrent it, but give it a Google. Give it a Google. And I think they're gonna kick us out, so I don't think we have time for questions, but we'll be around for another 5-10 minutes or so saying our goodbyes. So if you have any questions, just come on up and ask. We love to talk, especially about things that go bump in a night. So thanks again, everyone, for coming and listening in on this discussion. I hope that the next time you're being chased and stalked by a murderer, you'll know exactly what to do. Yes.
Not have sex.
Not have sex. And read the Bible. Just kidding. Thanks for coming. Yay.
Thank you all.